Good morning. Welcome back to the day two of the QS African Forum in Zanzibar. I'm Ahmed and my colleague is Sakshi, and we will be your MCs. We're excited to guide you through day two of QS Africa Forum 2025. But first, a big thank you to our wonderful host, Modern College of Business and Science, for making this summit a possibility. We would also like to thank all our partners and sponsors to their invaluable contributions, without whom this event will not be possible. It is great to see so many familiar faces, and we hope you have enjoyed yesterday's insightful sessions and networking opportunities. Just a quick reminder on some housekeeping. Please ensure your phones are off and other devices are set to silence or vibrate. If you need to take a call, we kindly ask you to step outside. In case of an emergency, please calmly exit via the side doors and follow the staff to the designated safety areas. We absolutely loved seeing all of your engagement yesterday. Now, to kick off this meeting, we have a very insightful session on QS Sub-Saharan African rankings. Please welcome Lee Camelins, Director of Analytics and Evaluation at QS, and Ludovic Hyman, Strategic Ranking Consultant and Secretary to the QS Global Rankings Advisory Board. Please welcome.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. It's very good to see so many of you at 9 o'clock in the morning as well, which I think really talks to the interest and excitement that we see around rankings when we talk about this at QS. So my name is Lee Camelins. I have been in QS for a decade now, and over that time worked with thousands of universities around the world, helping them understand comparative metrics, how they can improve and so forth. And I'm joined by Ludovic Hyman. If you could introduce yourself, Ludovic.
Yes. So my name's Ludovic. I'm a strategic ranking consultant at QS, and I'm also an associate professor in higher education management at the University of Bath.
Okay, so today what we're going to do is tell you a little bit about the background of rankings, explain to you a little bit about where this comes from, what it's all about, and then we'll go into some of the details of what we're proposing for a sub-Saharan African ranking. So I'm going to start off telling you a little bit about a story about QS, though, because I think this is really important in contextualizing the ranking, really helping you understand what this is about. So QS was established in 1990 with this mission to empower motivated people around the world to fulfill their potential. This is through fostering international mobility, educational achievement, and career development. What this really means is our founder, Nunzio Quacquarelli, went as an international student to the US to study. At the time, he really found a problem with trying to understand what options were available to universities, to study in. That's where the company was founded, really helping students understand their options to study, where they could go, what those options were. And this is really at the heart of what we're doing, trying to help students understand what their choices are. And in that, we also help universities understand how they could benchmark their performance, how they can understand their performance to provide a much better experience for those students.
So in this slide, we talk about how QS is actually the most trusted brand in higher education in the world. Here you have an overview of the sort of traction the QS website gets compared to other organizations that also offer rankings like THE or the Shanghai ranking, the academic ranking of world universities. And what you see is that there's just, a huge traction towards the QS portfolio of rankings. And it's something, we're very proud of. And it really shows the impact of our work across the globe.
Yeah, so just to sort of summarize this, it's about 85% of all searches for rankings and performance insight about universities around the world are people looking for QS's insight. And we think this is really important for us to really have robust metrics and really strong governance processes beneath that to really make sure we are acting really responsibly in this. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. So some of the lenses on performance that we have around the world, we have our World University Rankings, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but we also provide a lot of more specific lenses to understand performance in different contexts or areas that universities are working in. So this includes subject level rankings, regional rankings, which at the moment only cover Latin America, the Asia region, the Arab region, and Europe. So there's a real gap here in our performance lens on Africa. We have a Best Student Cities rankings, which helps students understand the different study destinations, because this is quite important in their choice, as well as sustainability rankings, which drill into issues not only around environmental impact, but also social impact and governance within universities, which is absolutely vital. We also have a series of rankings looking at the graduate management education space, so really looking at business education and how this is equipping future leaders for business and so forth. So I'm going to hand over to Ludovic, who's going to tell us a bit more about the type of methods we use and the philosophy behind that.
So I'm going to talk about first the QS World University Ranking methodology, because I think it's helpful to sort of situate the Sub-Saharan Africa ranking within the metrics and the indicators we use for the World University Ranking. So this is an overview of the different lenses and indicators that are included in the QS World University Ranking methodology. So as you see, the 5 main lenses are research and discovery, global engagement / internationalization, employability, the learning experience through, the teaching experience, and sustainability. So they're the 5 big lenses, and within these 5 lenses, there's different indicators who are made up of individual metrics. And, why these lenses? Go back to the mission of the university. What is the mission of a university? What are the 3 missions? Research, teaching, service, and citizenship. So, these lenses reflect that.
Yeah, they are sometimes lenses, if you could just flip back, actually. That I think sometimes when I've talked to academics around the world who are maybe working in fields like engineering or the sciences, struggle to sort of conceptualize and understand. But these approaches are very much, the approach we take is very much embedded in the social sciences. So what we're doing is really getting people's perspectives on what good university performance looks like. So our academic reputation lens, for example, is essentially a peer review by other academics of what they think a good university looks like. Similarly, our employer reputation lens does the same with employers. We survey about 100,000 employers around the world and ask them which universities they think the best graduates are coming from. So this is, it takes a little bit of a mind shift sometimes to sort of understand the value of that. But I do think these types of metrics really point to broader social impact of the university. Is the university known from outside its very specific, detailed bubble on what it's doing? Is it making a bigger impact on society and really being seen to be doing that?
Thank you, Lee. And so, in the World University Ranking currently, I know yesterday some of you mentioned this, there's 7 universities in Africa in the top 500. That's an interesting stat, but actually 2 of those, Cairo University and the American University of Cairo, are in North Africa. So that actually brings down to 5, the number in Sub-Saharan Africa. But in total, there's 19 institutions from Sub-Saharan Africa in the World University Ranking. There's only 6 locations represented currently, and the University of Cape Town is the top performer. So that kind of sets the scene in the sense that there aren't many African or Sub-Saharan African universities in the World University Ranking, which makes the need to increase the visibility of institutions in the region through regional ranking even more important. And then, when you look at the World University Ranking, what can that tell us? If you look at the scores under individual metrics or indicators, well, first of all, what you see is that African universities are really good at international research collaboration. So under IRN, the scores of most African or sub-Saharan African universities are really, really high. But in citations per faculty, not so good. So here, you have specific data. 84% of ranked institutions score 50 or more under IRN. And then 73% of those institutions have citations faculty scores that are significantly lower than their IRN score. So, it's a bit of a quant data dump. So what does that mean? It just means that, while it's obvious that African universities are really connected internationally and are, producing research with other with researchers in other countries, that's not always translated in impact. So why are they not getting the full impact of those partnerships? That's an interesting question. And then in another slide, we look at employability. So again, in terms of employment outcomes, so employment outcomes is made up of, alumni impact and graduate employability rates of an institution. So that's a really good measure of employability. And African universities do really well there. But what you notice is that in terms of employer reputation scores, those universities that do so well under employment outcomes do not do so well in getting that employer reputation. And that, again, what does that tell us? It tells us that African universities are really good at producing good employability outcomes for their students, but it's not recognized by employers. So again, why is that not being reflected in their employer reputation? Is another really, really interesting outcome question. And then again, when you look at which are the highest ranked institution by location, obviously we've all talked about the University of Cape Town. It's in the top 200, it's 150th. That's very visible. But then there's already a big drop when you move on to the other locations. And as I said before, there are only 6 countries/locations that are represented in the World University Ranking.
One observation here is that, the majority of the institutions we're seeing right at the top of our tables, and these that are perhaps carrying these historic sort of reputations and historic legacies are really almost all state-funded institutions. And one of the reasons we want to provide a more detailed lens going a lot further is to really be able to highlight some of the innovation that's going on in the broader sector. There's such a large diversity of types of institutions, and going beyond just this really top of the surface, we think we can really help uncover what innovation is going on across the broader sector and really see how that is evolving over time.
So, when we do create a new ranking, we always look at policies and, market trends within the region, because, we need to reflect those in the indicators we select and the weightings. So, when you look at Africa, you have to look at the messages being, discussed at the regional level. So look at what the African Union, what their goals and objectives are for the continent. And yesterday, I know several speakers spoke about, the percentage of research output that Africa produces, and it's like around 2, 3, 1%, depending on the year. But the African Union has the ambitious goal of, reaching 10% within 10 years, which, it's very ambitious. And it has to be also balanced with what's happening in the world. China has, increased, it's at 23, 25%. It's going to go up again. It's producing more and more research. Europe, countries like Germany and France have had excellence initiatives, and they're pushing their universities to produce more research. So actually, it's an increasingly competitive research environment out there, and it will be very hard for any country to like increase their share of global research output. So that's something to keep in mind, but that also means that we have to, in a ranking of African institutions, include research metrics, because this is a priority for the region. Again, target of 100,000 doctorates by 2034, of which at least 20,000 should be in STEM subjects. That's also, something we need to take into account. And, there's a metric, an indicator that will reflect that. And again, only 35% of faculty hold PhD level qualifications across Africa. South Africa has the highest ratio. This is also, something we need to take into account. Obviously, higher education, the African Union is aware that it's important for the knowledge economies we want to live in. So obviously, higher education increasingly becomes the bedrock of all continental strategies. Increasing internet connectivity to 80%, that's also a very big, important objective. And finally, working towards the massification of higher education and the target of 50% higher education enrollment. And just about the doctorates, I think that's an interesting thing because oftentimes PhD supervision is still quite traditional. You have the one supervisor. I did my PhD at Trinity College Dublin, which is one of the oldest universities in the Western world, and it was very traditional. I had one supervisor. I met with him twice a month, and I was given draft chapters to submit. And that model is good, but it shouldn't be the only model because it is quite inaccessible. It's expensive unless you have a scholarship, and also you have to do it full-time. You can't be working part-time. So creating, if that is an objective, 100,000 doctorates, creating alternative models, doctoral supervision, professional doctorates, part-time doctorates, to enable adults working part-time to access these qualifications. And that goes back to SDG 4, inclusive and equitable quality education and lifelong opportunities for all. Lifelong opportunities is not just about doing a short course or an undergraduate degree. It's also looking about how PhDs can be accessible, how that lifelong learning opportunity can be accessible to many people.
I mean, I think the message here really, though, is something needs to change. These targets are ambitious. They're not targets that are sort of happening in isolation because the rest of the world is also evolving and changing and different parts of the world are transforming. So, something does fundamentally need to change in the way we're working towards these targets. And it's been really sort of reassuring to see some of the conversations we've had over the last day here on how we may do that. However, what is missing is a set of comparative metrics really to understand, are we tracking in the right direction or not? Where are the real successes so we can learn from those and really being able to understand what is going on in other institutions, because too often we're still working in a little bit of a bubble here. Not just here, in places all around the world this is true, where I think many institutions are still working in quite a bubble in the way they're working towards these goals.
And this just goes back to IRN or international research collaboration. And this is really one of the strong points of institutions in sub-Saharan Africa. As you can see, over half of all publications in Africa are published in co-authorship with another country or researchers from another country. And that's, above the average for the EU, North America, and Latin America. So this is really something positive and something we want to include in the sub-Saharan Africa to showcase this.
However, what's not registering in those metrics, because it's only making up a really small proportion, is the intra-African collaboration. And I think here is one of the real opportunities to sort of unlock this power. And I know a couple of years ago at the African Association of Universities Core VIP conference, the leaders from across the region were really talking about how to unlock that potential as well. We need to do this, but we also need to really make sure we're thinking about how Africa can be that knowledge powerhouse, because I think the right skills are there often. It's just building these processes around the way we're working. And
this is just to give you an idea of which subject areas are the most, international oriented in terms of, research co-authorships. Medicine, engineering, agriculture and biological sciences, computer science, so a lot of STEM subjects, but also the social sciences. So yeah, that's where the international research collaboration is happening. And I think here, just to reiterate my earlier point, everyone has heard of those institutions in the top 10, University of Cape Town, Stellenbosch University, University of KwaZulu-Natal, we all know these institutions, and they're all included in the QS World University Ranking. But if you look at the second tranche of institutions from rank 11 to 20, and this is by research volume of papers, already 5 out of 10 of those institutions do not appear in the QS World University Rankings. Gondar University, Université de Yaoundé 1, they produce a lot of research, but they're not at all captured. And, we want to shine a light on these institutions because, it's a great shame that they're not covered in any way in rankings. So moving on to the actual methodology we're working towards for the Sub-Saharan Africa region. As you'll see, and this is why I wanted to show you the World University Ranking methodology, it's similar. Like all our regional rankings, we tend to use similar metrics, similar indicators, but we tweak them to the individual regions, to what is important to that region, and that's why you'll see a lot of familiar faces or indicators. But just to show you where the changes are really at that level. Sustainability. So sustainability is hugely important for the region. We run surveys asking students what they want from their institution, and sustainability always comes up very high, especially in Africa. So that's gone from 5 to 10%. The International Research Network, we're increasing, obviously, from 5 to 15%, because it's really important for Africa. And employability is also a huge issue on the continent, so we're increasing that metric. And however, we're reducing the weight to academic reputation and faculty-student ratio. And then the region-specific indicators here, staff with PhDs, web impact, that's related to the African Union's push for greater internet connectivity across the continent, citations per paper and papers per faculty, because again, this research volume and impact of research is very important to the African Union, and that global share of research output is supposed to increase in the future. So these indicators are very useful for that.
If you just flip back to the previous slide, we'll just quickly talk through the philosophy behind each of these metrics as well, so really understand what they're about. So just starting off with the metrics under the research and discovery lens, the first metric we look at is the academic reputation of universities. So I mentioned this before, it's essentially a peer review of other academics on which universities they think are the best in their area of expertise. So with this, we fold in a survey of about 150,000 academics around the world, and really asking them specific questions. We're saying, if you're, for example, a history professor, tell us which universities are best in this discipline area. So who is better to know than the people working in those fields? We bring in a metric around citations per paper, which is, really a proxy for the impact in the research space that each paper that's being published is making. We have a metric around papers per faculty. This is really thinking about the volume of research. Are we producing, starting to share the ideas with the rest of the world? Are we really producing those papers at a volume where they're going to get noticed? Moving across to the employability metrics, we have employer reputation as our primary metric there. This is really at the heart of it coming from that student perspective, where this is the primary reason most students go to university. They want to know they're going to get a job, but not just any job. They want to know they're going to get a really good, a really impactful job for the younger generations. And this is basically asking employers a similar question to what we asked academics. Who do they think the best graduates are coming from? Moving on to our global engagement metrics, the first one focuses on international research networks. So we talked a little bit about that. It's looking at not only the number of research collaborations that you have with institutions around the world, but the diversity of different countries you're going to be collaborating with. We also have the web impact metric, which Ludovic just talked about. And I think these two metrics actually tie together quite well because, if you're not actually communicating very well with the rest of the world about what you're doing, how do potential partners even know they should be coming and collaborating with you and drawing on your experience as an institution? It seems like something really basic, but it's absolutely fundamental and it is the thing that's going to help drive those more impactful and support those more impactful research collaborations. Sustainability seems pretty obvious. So with the sustainability metrics, again, this is really rooted in the student sort of perspective. 88% of students, prospective students around the world now factor this into their aspirations when they're choosing which university they would like to study at. They want to see what the university is doing in this space to not only tackle climate change, but also focusing on social issues, making sure universities are really promoting issues around human rights, around equalities and overcoming these problems. This is something that, 5 years ago even, students wasn't really on their radar, but now is absolutely core to the way they're thinking about what university is about and what they should do. And then the learning experience, we look at the faculty-student ratio. It's not a perfect metric, we absolutely recognize that, but it is a proxy for, how personalized is that experience likely to be for a student? And then the stuff with PhD metric, Ludovic just unpacked a little bit for you.
And I'll just add about sustainability. What's really important here is that it looks at the institution in a really holistic way and also at an operational level. So, before research and teaching, tell your academic staff to publish more, teach better, okay, but what is the institution doing as a whole? Most staff in universities now are not academics, it's professional services, managers, what are they doing to contribute to the institutional ESG goals? So things like how many women are represented on the board, is there an elected student union, is there an ethics culture? Beyond the research ethics committee, all universities have that, hopefully, but is there an ethical culture of the organization as a whole? All those things really put the university as a whole under the microscope, and not just telling researchers to publish more in better journals, teach better. There's more than that going on in a university. Yep. So we covered that. And, I thought this quote was quite interesting in terms of, research productivity and completion rates of PhDs. There are challenges in Africa. There's more effort is needed in training capacity and completion rates of PhDs. And again, that might be linked to the traditional model of a PhD, the one-on-one supervisor, student, that might need reviewing, or alternative models of a PhD need to be offered. I work on a professional doctorate at the University of Bath. It's called the Doctor of Business Administration and Higher Education Management. Many of our students actually come from Southern Africa, so Namibia, South Africa, and in institutions, they could be like registrars, directors of human resources. They carry on working in their jobs, and they come to Bath for residentials, and that just opens the doctoral level to so many more students than the traditional model, which, doing a one-to-one PhD, it takes a lot of sacrifices, it's expensive, and you can't really do it unless you have more funding opportunities and you move from that. So that was just an aside. And we've been through all these indicators already, so I won't go through them again. And I just wanted to cover an example of an institution that is quite engaged in terms of sustainability, and that's the University of Botswana. So here, what does it mean to be, sustainably engaged as an organization, as a university? Well, again, you look at the main missions of a university. I think I mentioned this before, the teaching mission, the research mission, and then the service and citizenship mission. You look at whether a university is really, operating sustainably in all these three missions. And the University of Botswana is a really good example of this in terms of, including SDGs in their curriculum. So they have this SDG 4 committee established in 2016. There's an SDG hub, and it makes sure that all programs offered within the university have the SDGs included in the curriculum. Research centers, having different research centers. Not obviously having a climate change research center is good, but also look at other research centers covering societal issues, social problems, or social challenges. Really that sort of multidisciplinarity in the research centers. So at the University of Botswana, they have the Okavango Research Institute, but they also have the San Research Center, and this is really trying to inform the government about San culture, increasing access of San people to higher education, and then the Center for Scientific Research, Indigenous Knowledge, and Innovation. So you really see that breadth of research fields and interests there covered. And then finally, the Botswana University of Pennsylvania partnership. That's an example of a very established international cooperation agreement, and it's between the University of Botswana, the University of Pennsylvania, and the Botswana government. So again, that triple helix of government, universities getting together. They're really tackling real issues, the HIV epidemic, improving healthcare and research capacity while also training healthcare professionals in Botswana. So that's really important. Of course, and I think we mentioned yesterday, relying too much on foreign funding can have its downsides. It's always a good idea to have multiple partners and a diversity of funding from different countries. But this partnership, for instance, that I wanted to show you in terms of
one thing I'll just point out about this, if you just go back to that slide, when you look at the rankings metrics that we're proposing on measuring, you don't see any of these things in those metrics directly. And what we're doing is essentially trying to measure the outcomes of these types of activities. All of these types of activities and many other sort of types of research, collaboration, student experience and so forth will be reflected in the long term in the outcomes in terms of how the university is being recognized and so forth. So I just wanted to point out that we're not trying to measure every individual activity an institution is doing, but rather what those broad outcomes of these types of initiatives are. And, this is a really, really strong one. I think, when you look at that type of collaboration they've got between University of Botswana and Penn, it's really not this transactional type of relationship. It goes really, really deep, addressing many different sort of facets of how the institution's operating, its ability to impact on the world, its ability, most importantly, to take the knowledge from Africa and take that to the world, which is absolutely vital here.
Thanks, Lee. And just in practical terms, that sort of partnership between the University of Botswana and UPenn, you can see it reflected in who are the University of Botswana's top research collaborators, who do they publish publications with? Well, University of Pennsylvania, number one. So that can really help foster and boost research productivity. But also what you see from this table is that actually the University of Botswana partners with a lot of regional universities in South Africa and Ethiopia. So it's really like building research capacity or research productivity and research impact can come through the collaborations like the University of Botswana UPenn partnership. Okay, and Lee.
So I want to get a little bit more into the practicalities now. Sort of try to give the philosophy here of why are we doing this, why it's important, and the types of things it can tell us about a university, and how it's making an impact on the world, really. But we really encourage institutions to engage in this process. You know, I said at the start, one of the things that I think really is lacking at the moment, when I compare what's happening in this region compared to other parts of the world we've been working with, is this real ability of a really comprehensive set of metrics to benchmark performance against. You know, you can see from that example we gave, there's absolutely amazing, like world-changing sort of activities going on within institutions. But, is that more impactful than what's going on in a neighboring institution? What can be learnt from that if it is, and so forth, is the thing that is lacking a bit at the moment. There isn't the comprehensive set of metrics to be able to do that. So that's the primary reason we really are talking about bringing a ranking to the region. It provides that opportunity to learn, as I was just saying, but also then really plan quite strategically about, okay, what do we need to change? What do we need to evolve to really tap into the potential that our institution has and really find the way to differentiate ourselves from elsewhere. Where there are those successes, again, it provides that opportunity to tell that story to the rest of the world, help, perpetuate that sort of opportunity to attract further partners that can even drive that impact further. And of course, to celebrate those achievements, not only for the institution, but also, for broader society. We do have in many countries this almost distrust sometimes among the public in higher education institutions. The average sort of person out there, often there is a little bit of a disconnect where they're seen as some sort of elitist sort of constructs. And, there's a real opportunity to demonstrate a lot more clearly, how you are supporting, the broader society around you and really, helping, transform the lives of everyday people out there. So I really love this quote from one academic who works at Yonsei University in Korea. And this is an institution that, for the last 2 decades actually have been using these types of metrics to really transform what their institution's about, what the impact they're making for their local societies is. And In-Han Song said that rankings force us to reflect on what actions we can take to improve our society. There's something that are evaluating the results of what we've done in the past, but if we use those metrics, really it helps us springboard the future. It helps us drive those strategic decisions to work out what we can do next to drive that broader impact. So our next steps with the QS Sub-Saharan African rankings. We've been working with many institutions across the region who have been providing us with some basic data to support our analysis. If you are interested in getting involved and aren't yet, there's our details. Drop us an email and our team will really help you work out what's needed and so forth. Once we produce the ranking, we'll provide a whole series of outcomes that you can use to either promote your outcomes, really think within your institutions about what are the areas where there may need to be some evolution. Throughout the year, we're going to hold these forums. We're going to hold a series of online webinars as well to really understand, how to use these metrics and what can be done with them. So please come and engage with those. And you can sort of find all the details through our website, obviously, at qs.com. So our current intention is we're doing the analysis at the moment to launch a pilot version of this ranking. The results are intended to come out early next year, probably around February. We're just working out the exact dates depending on that. And we're really going to, at that time, try and unpack some of this insight a little bit further for you. So hopefully that's given you some useful insight into the type of metrics we're talking about for a sub-Saharan African ranking. It is very much a work in progress for us, though, so we would welcome any feedback, any comments. Come and speak to myself and Ludovic at the QS booth out in the coffee area later, and would love to incorporate your thoughts into this process. So thank you very much. Actually, do we have a little time for questions, if there's any? Yes. Okay. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask or any observations?
Thank you so much for the very informative presentation. Ranking is, as you said, forces a lot of institutions to reflect on their actions, achievements, and so on. But we know that the world is not, let's say the countries are not at the same level because of a lot of factors that they don't have control over in terms of finance, in terms of resources. So in ranking usually treats most of these institutions using the same kind of metrics and let's say criteria. And is it fair to put everybody at the same level in terms of that a lot of institutions maybe might not have the same kind of access to facilities, resources, and so on. So I don't know about QS in handling such a situation.
No, I think this is a really good question, and there's kind of two answers I have to that. So the whole ethos behind QS's rankings is we're trying to bring information to students about which universities are going to provide them with the greatest opportunity. And from that student perspective, it's almost not about creating this fairness in a way. It's providing them that, quite transparent lens on who is making the biggest impact. However, the metrics are super important, I think, to understand where there are challenges and so forth. So we work with dozens of governments around the world, actually, who use these metrics to understand, actually, which universities may have challenges. Where do we need to perhaps, focus on rediverting funding to build, sort of knowledge capacity within the country? And I think, if you don't have these sort of quite sort of transparent lenses on what's going on, you miss that opportunity to also support those institutions that may need different support in a different way, and really, work out how you can, drive towards a greater impact that others may be making.
Yeah, and I would add to that I really get your point, but I think that's especially if you're focusing on being a top, world-class university, top 100, etc. But I think the rankings are so much more than just focusing on that tiny pinnacle of institutions at the very top. I think just being in a ranking, even if you're 1,300th or something, is really important for most institutions, actually, just to have that visibility and to be able to have all that data publicly available for students to be able to access that data. And that, in terms of wealth and funding, it plays a lesser role at that level. But I agree for the top 50 or top 100, yes, there is finance funding matters. But beyond that, which is for the majority of institutions, that, funding is less important and plays less of a major role, I think.
And one other thing I'll just add to that is, I think the overall ranking number that an institution receives is the headline grabbing sort of thing that we see. We see it in newspapers, on news bulletins, all types of things. However, we know that many people who are navigating this information, who come into our website, are not just looking at that, they're drilling into the metrics underneath that to sort of inform sort of their decisions on what they're trying to do. So, for different students in different parts of the world who have different priorities, different individuals in those parts of the world all have different priorities. For someone who's aspiring, for a career in business or whatever, actually they're probably going to look at, okay, these employment outcomes, this is absolutely the most vital thing for them. If they're aspiring as a career, for a career in academia, they're going to be looking at a different set of metrics in there. So I know the overall ranking, does create this sort of picture of unfairness sometimes. However, this is not the way people are always navigating this information. They are using it in a much more nuanced way than is obvious on the surface.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the presentation. And if you allow me, I would like to add something to this question. So my name is Niki Castaño. I'm senior consultant with the QS, and I definitely get your point, Dr. Ahmed. We receive this question quite often. And one thing that we have to be aware of, besides what Ludovic and Lee are talking about, this regional specificity in order to try to really make this difference less important, is also the fact that we have a very broad portfolio of rankings that will also cover not only the world one, the global one, where all the universities will assess almost at the same time, but also others, like the rankings by subject. Great institutions around the world cannot make it to the World University Rankings, so they will do it on their speciality. And there they will be the best ones. And I'm not talking about only institutions in the regions, also in Europe, for example. So this is also to think that it's not only to keep this fixation about the World University Rankings, but we have more than that. And universities can just think and what they are very strong and good at, and then aim to be present there. So regionally speaking, or by specialty, sustainability rankings is a very good example. So let's not only fixate about this World University Rankings, I mean, it's our flagship, but universities in different regions and different specialties, they also have a part to take in our QS ranking. Do you want to add? There's another comment here.
Okay, one final comment. Yeah,
just one final comment. Everything is a process, and so if universities, just to introduce myself, my name is Veronica Meni, Principal Consultant with QS Consulting and Insights. Everything is a process, and you can't expect that universities are automatically going to know what best practice is globally. It has to be a process which they aspire to and which they achieve over time. And so rankings can guide good practice within institutions, and obviously it's like a stepping stone. Before you get to the world rankings, you have to do well regionally, and so it's almost like learning what others are doing, learning what is actually relevant in your region. And so rankings are there to guide that and perhaps to help to assess, because you may not necessarily be knowing what the university in the country next door is doing. And so it gives you an example of peer benchmarking that is positive in that context. And then if you do well regionally, then there's potential to do well globally. But it is a step-by-step process. You can't expect somebody who isn't standing out regionally to suddenly do well in the global context.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you. Please do come and share your thoughts further with us at the QS booth. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lee and Ludovic, for that fascinating presentation. Now, please welcome our next moderator, Mr. Jason Newman, Chief Commercial Officer at QS, along with his panelists who will be discussing harnessing technology and digital transformation for development.
I guess that was a call for my panelists to please join me on the stage. Just in case it wasn't clear, I would like to invite you up. Thank you. We're just going to align our seating to the image on the screen. Anyway, a very good morning. I trust everybody enjoyed that session. I thought it was very insightful. For me as a QSer, I learnt more this morning on the new ranking that's been developed. But we're not here to talk rankings now. We are talking about technology, the harnessing of technology and digital transformation for development, particularly in the age of AI, data analytics, and the world changing rapidly around us, both within the higher education sector, the way that consumers, which we all are, part of, are utilizing technology, and in particular the younger generation. How is this going to impact on the future of higher education? And here in the Africa context, what are going to really be critical areas for the sector to focus on? How do we make higher education more accessible? How do we harness that technology in the right way? So we have a wonderful panel here to debate and discuss these very interesting and relevant topics. I'm going to introduce them by name, if that's okay with you guys. So we have Professor Robert Gataru, the Vice Chancellor for Riara University in Kenya. We've got Professor Ambrina Manji she's a Professor of Law and the Africa Dean at Cardiff University, UK. Excuse me. We have Professor Peter Kiera, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Administration, Planning and Institutional Advancement at Mount Kenya University. And we have Professor Oyewole, Secretary General from the Association of African Universities. So please give them all a very warm welcome, and we look forward to our debate. Thank you. Well, I'm conscious that we ran over time, but we are not going to rush. We are going to make sure that we get our full 50 minutes. So I hope that works for everybody, and then I guess there'll be a break. But I'm going to kick off with my first question, if I may, and perhaps I could take that to you at the very end of the line there, Professor Oyewole. How can African universities leverage technology to improve access to education and enhance learning outcomes for students? Sorry? Oh, I'm so sorry. How can African universities leverage technology to improve access to education and enhance learning outcomes for students?
Universities in Africa today, especially after the experience of the pandemic, now see the need to employ technology for various activities. And some of the things they do include teaching and research. And what they do to make access possible include the following: infrastructure production. They provide necessary infrastructure so that the users, the learners, can gain easy access. They also provide inclusive training and support to both the students and the staff in the various institutions. And they promote partnership, not just within the institutions, but with IT companies beyond, in order to provide some emergency support when there are challenges.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to pose the same question, if I may, perhaps to Professor Gataru. Would you mind answering to that question, please?
Good morning. So, yeah, I fully agree. And there's a lot happening already in our institutions in terms of shifting towards use of technology to enhance access. At post-COVID, most of our institutions have transitioned into some form of online learning. I want to call it some form of, because there are many versions of that. And so going into ERP systems and the other things. But the few questions that come to mind, one, of course, is what is the cost of these systems and how easily accessible is this technology to all the students that we have? Because not all students have the capacity to buy the devices, the laptops, and everything that is required to access these technologies. We have students who come from places where there's even no electricity. So where will they charge these devices when you're providing that access? So the other question, again, is what is the position of competencies? in the digital learning space, because it's one thing to provide access, but it's another thing to develop competencies in the learner. And what we need in Africa is a combination of the two, both access, but not at the expense of competencies. And from our experience as Riara University, and we have interacted with a number of other partners, is that especially for these young students, face-to-face still remains extremely important to develop the right competencies and values that will make them useful in the workplace. So we have to strike a balance between access and competence development. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll pose the same question, if I may, to you, Professor Kiera. That would be really useful to get your opinion on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, my name is Peter Kirira. I come from Mount Kenya University. And I want to agree with the two speakers, what they have mentioned, and actually talk about our experience. During the COVID pandemic, of course, it was not possible to have physical access to the universities. We were on a lockdown. And therefore, as a university, luckily we had an ODEL platform, online distance and electronic learning platform that we had established. And therefore, we had to leverage on this platform, and we moved all our learning to the online platform. Of course, it had its own challenges. And one of the challenges is the fact that we had to build capacity of our staff to be able to use tools, online tools, to effectively do the training. The other challenge that has been mentioned is the fact that also not all our students would be able to have access to internet. And I'll give you statistics. If you look at Africa, the internet penetration is about 43 to 45%. As a continent, you come to Kenya, is about 65%, driven largely by mobile internet provider. And what we did to address that challenge as an institution is that we had to partner with the Safaricom, which is our biggest mobile provider, and it was able to give some discounted bundles to our students, and through that, they were able to effectively run the ODEL or training. Then the other challenge that came was the issue of how do you assess whether learning has taken place? Because again, you have to, at the end of the training, you have to give an assessment, an exam. And obviously, when you have online exams, the challenges that comes in is, students want to take advantage and check. So we had to invest into a proctoring solution. It is not easy, it's costly, but that direction we had to take. So COVID really pushed us a bit when it comes to leveraging on technology. And through that, we were able to continue our learning without interruption. But I want to admit, we dropped about 30% of our students who had really no way that they could have been able to access internet, but when now, of course, we came back to physical learning, we were able to ensure that they caught up. So it is indeed true, African universities can leverage on technology to improve access, but it has to be done in a way that is cognizant of the challenges that are there, especially for institutions that have students that are coming from different parts of the community, some low-resourced communities, where you need to make sure that as an institution, you go ahead and ensure that even students who are there are not disadvantaged. So thank you.
That's a wonderful answer. Thank you very much. And Professor Manji, do you have any observations, anything you'd like to add to that thought?
Thank you. Just to endorse everything that my colleagues have said, but also to add that I think there's enormous potential in the fact that we could use technology to promote what you might call non-traditional pathways to learning. So there are I think, real opportunities for developing schemes of stackable credentials, for example, micro-credentials where you allow people to take part in lifelong learning and to develop modules, for example, online, where our students would have access to developing a series of micro-credentials, certification and so on, which would eventually may lead to a degree, but may not, so that students who don't want to follow a traditional pathway can, for example, tuck their education into their professional lives and commitments. I think there is untapped potential there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all for that. So leading into my next question, if I may, what are the key challenges faced by African universities in implementing digital transformation initiatives, and how can these be addressed? I think we've already touched on some of those core challenges, but I think it's, we're going to have to face up on how do we address those challenges that are put forward. So perhaps I could direct that question to start with yourself, Professor Gataru. I'd be interested to get your view on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we can talk about challenges until evening, but I'll just try to capture just a few. The first, and I alluded to it in my earlier comment, is the cost of digital transformation. That's big. I say this because we are looking at institutions. First of all, Africa is very big, and there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to digital transformation. Different institutions are at different stages, different levels of funding, different accreditation systems and all that. And so the resources that institutions have, they have to divide them against very many competing interests. When you look at places like Kenya, for example, public universities account for over 80% of the population of students in the universities. Private universities, which are easier to move towards digital transformation and things like those, account for only 20% of the students in the university. So even if all the private universities were to do digital transformation, there's 80% of the students who are learning through traditional methods. And so how are these public institutions funded? Do they have the right resources to buy all these solutions that are coming? So that's one big issue. The number two is a lack of structure and understanding of what is this digital transformation. If you ask different people, they'll say different things, and they'll just send to the ICT director to figure it out. But it's not just about systems, it's about people, it's about business models, it's about so many other things. So there's lack of capacity and lack of understanding. Number three, we have a lot of legacy systems. You're talking about AI, you're talking about digital transformation, but there's a university, which is running on Windows Server 2008 still. So how will you do digital transformation when you're running servers that are still, they're not even being supported by Microsoft anymore? So there are those fundamental things that we need to address if we are really going to help African institutions. And then just finally, I think there are too many solutions being pushed to us. I'm speaking now from the university side. Every week I get 2-3 emails, oh, this is the best solution to solve all your problems. The other day I got one that said, are you confused about which tool to use? Now ours will help you make sense of all the other tools. And so how do we customize this to the specific needs of specific institutions? I think that is one of the biggest challenges. Yeah.
Thank you very much. May pose the same question, if I may, to you, Professor Oyewole. That would be a good one for you to answer.
Yeah. Apart from the issue of the high costs, there are some other challenges that may not be technology-based. For example, resistance to change in many institutions is a big challenge that institutions need to grapple with. Many of the academia find it difficult to adapt to the new need to go through the new technology. It has also been found that many of the institutions do not even have policies to direct the use of technology in their various domains. And where there is no policy, it's been difficult to make it operational. And I guess that for many institutions that are here now, issues about cybersecurity is one that has been a challenge to many institutions. Indeed, many institutions cannot afford the cost to be able to provide adequate security for their various systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Kira, could you please follow on from that?
Okay, thank you. I'll try to avoid repeating what my colleagues have mentioned. I think one of the challenges that we have encountered as an institution, like I mentioned in embracing digital transformation, was the fact that there is regulatory rigidity. You find some of our regulators cannot believe that you can offer the same training through alternative system. They just want the physical, the classical way of teaching. And therefore, it has not been easy, especially when we are trying to embrace. I'll give an example. For example, we train medical students, and one of the requirements for students is to do anatomy, and they have to dissect cadavers. But we have virtual reality that can actually simulate a cadaver, because getting cadavers for 200 students, because a student has to dissect, a cadaver all through. So, but convincing our regulators that we can still simulate the same environment through virtual reality and you can still have a good product is not easy. Of course, we are engaging with them. Another example is we offer teaching. We train teachers, and also the regulator is not convinced that actually you can train a teacher, pedagogy skills, through an online platform. So these are some of the challenges that are there. Of course, we engage, we discuss, and hopefully we will surmount these challenges as time goes, because the reality is that change is inevitable. We eventually will have to move to an environment where we have to embrace these changes. Thank you.
Thank you. And Professor Manji, would you like to add any comment to that?
Just to add that I think there's a risk, a challenge, that we have a real generational gulf opening up where our academic colleagues and indeed the regulator just are not as confident with technology and its uses as our young students. And that is a real problem, because the risk is that we have a very savvy young population of students, and the generation of academic colleagues and the regulator are kind of talking past them, and they aren't really holding the same skills, don't even have the same expectations. I think our young people are so savvy with technology. They're expecting us to teach in ways that are that use this technology, that are as engaging as possible. And we don't, I think, as academics, don't really measure up. Our skills and our experiences and abilities don't measure up to that demand.
That's a really interesting observation. One that I hadn't considered, but it's very true. And we see that often in the commercial world, where you're developing websites or social media platforms to engage with a younger audience, but that younger audience is already 5 years ahead of you when you're trying to develop. So it's a challenge, I think, for all parts of society. I've actually just sort of taken on note here, and there's lots coming through here with the challenges, and I think funding, building that infrastructure seems to be coming through loud and clear. So I'm going to jump to my last question, then I'm going to go back up. And if I may, I'm going to start with you again, Professor Oyewole. How can partnerships with the private sector and tech companies help accelerate digital transformation in African universities? Yes, please. Sorry.
Yeah, we've received support from private sectors in that they've helped in providing necessary training for faculty members, and this has been found to be very useful in its promotion. They've also been available to provide offline solutions to solve challenges of non-availability of electricity. And they've gone beyond to also provide some solar energy solutions to support institutions that have electricity challenges in their various domains.
Thank you. May I pose that question to you, Professor Kiera?
Yes, thank you for that question. Indeed, partnership with the private sector is very instrumental when it comes, especially when it comes to accelerating digital transformation. I mentioned earlier how we were able to partner with Safaricom, which is a private sector, to subsidize internet during COVID. We also partner with KENET, the National Education Trust. KENET is able to offer also subsidized internet, and this really helps institutions to be able to embrace digital transformation in a cost-effective manner. Partners also provide grounds for mentorship, industry experience. We have programs where we are partnering with institutions that go beyond giving us commercial products, but they are also able to mentor our staff so that they are more effective in the way they deliver our curriculum. We are also working with other partners. I think some of them are here, Marwadi Technologies, who are also really helping us to walk that journey. I know they're in the meeting. We partner with Microsoft. Through those partnerships, even though there is a commercial aspect in the partnership, but also it brings on their add-ons that are, because they consider also the region we are operating in, and they're able to support and give supportive assistance. And this really has helped to ensure that those subsidies are able to help our students, especially the ones I talked about who are in the marginal areas. One of the things we do when we enter into a partnership is to really make sure we focus on our client, who is a student, and so that there is value that comes to our client. And we also look at how we make sure that our trainers are effective, because it is one thing to have a digital solution, but the other thing to really be able to use it optimally. Yeah. So, and because resources are not as scarce, whatever we get, we make sure that we use it to the optimum. Yes, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Prof. Gataru, do you have any experience or examples that you could share with us in terms of private sector partnership?
Yeah, so quite a number, and I don't want to repeat what colleagues have said, but partnerships are there and they're very instrumental even in the area of library. For example, now all universities in Kenya, we have the Kenya Library Information Systems Consortium, where we procure e-resources, e-books, e-journals collectively instead of individually. But partnerships with industry are very, very crucial because they help us to link with what actually is happening within the industry. So one example I'll give in our computer science program is we've partnered with IBM, and through their Skills Build program, our students are able to access all the resources within the IBM Skills Build portfolio to learn real skills that will be required in the industry. We've also gone beyond, and I think one of the things that we need to be careful about and to pay attention to is co-creation. I think, as I mentioned earlier, we cannot have a one-size-fits-all for all institutions. It has to be customized and co-created together with the institutions if really we are going to be able to make a difference. So for us, we decided, yes, we have ChatGPT, but it probably doesn't have the African context. So we developed our own large language model as Riara University. We're calling it Ruby AI. And it's fed with all the information about Riara University, our regulations, our programs, our everything, and linked to a few others. And students are able to, if you ask it about politics, it doesn't answer you. But if you ask it anything academic, it's able to answer you. And we've been able to do this with some of our partners. And it's a more customized a large language model for us, as opposed to just picking one that has been trained using other data from other jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof. Manji, would you like to add some thoughts to that?
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear about the large language models, and of course, those are only as good as, ChatGPT is only as good as the raw material that is fed into it, and of course, Africa will lose out in this regard because of the kind of stats on citation and production of scientific knowledge that we've just heard about in the earlier session. But just a word of warning, I think, as well about, becoming too carried away with this kind of vision of a techno future. That involves partnerships with the private sector and so on. I still think that our senior leadership at African universities needs to think really carefully about the balance to be struck between this access to technology and the really core skills that our students still need to be taught. We know that our students still don't read as much and as well as they should. They are still not good readers, and we don't train them to be deep readers. And I think technology has the danger inherent in it is that it displaces that key academic task that we must do as teachers. So that we have to be able to teach our students the skills of deep reading, of critical analysis, of writing their own work, independent thought, all of those things. And all of those things just need pen and paper.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to sort of try and move us in the technology world, but focus more on the research space now, moving away from perhaps the student area. But in what ways can digital tools, and online platforms be used to enhance collaboration and research partnerships within African universities and with their global partners? And perhaps I could put that back to you, Professor Oyewole, on a more sort of regional perspective. I think it would be good to get some feedback on that.
One, digital tools have been found to be useful in connecting scholars and sharing outputs through platforms like ResearchGate, Academia, ORCID, and others. Through this, research visibility and networking has been promoted through digital tools. It has also been easy for researchers to connect to each other on these digital tools, and therefore promoting dialogue and knowledge exchange across a distance that has not been possible before now. Yeah. And I believe that all of us were used to virtual conferencing, which has been an important tool for this. And almost every one of us now, we get used to making use of Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and others. I should also say that it has enabled co-authorship across large geographical distances through the use of collaborative writing online. And lastly, I will also say that it has enhanced access to knowledge and data, because now through digital tools, we now have digital resource sharing, which has made work easy in research fields. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm just interested, Professor Manji, maybe you've got some experience yourself of online and other platforms that you're utilizing?
Yeah, I mean, just in my own work, I'm a professor of law, and it's difficult to imagine that many of my collaborative projects, many of them with Kenyan universities, so I have an ongoing collaboration with Kabarak Law School to develop a new curriculum for judicial science. It's difficult to imagine that project ever getting off the ground if we hadn't been reliant on online contact, communication with each other. In fact, we wrote the bid together online with regular meetings. We brought all our partners together for their initial meetings online. Very little of that work has taken place in person. Of course, it's still important to meet in person, but it enables us as researchers to really make headway with our projects and ambitions. And I would just add to this that, thinking about the previous session and the importance that we would all want to place on intra-African collaboration, we all know the expense of flying across the continent. It's often easier to fly to Heathrow from Accra and then fly to Nairobi. We know that this makes it incredibly difficult to meet in person to collaborate. If indeed we want to valorize intra-African collaborative writing, publication, and so on, which we do, then there seems to me to be huge potential in using digital platforms, online meetings, and so on to make that kind of collaboration possible.
Thank you. Professor Katuru, would you care to follow on with that?
Just briefly, so, I fully agree with what Prof said, and that works also for teaching, as you were talking earlier, through the collaborative online international learning platforms. And we've done that with the institutions abroad. And students even are taught together, do projects together, and they submit in their different institutions. So using the power of technology. But now coming to research, I would just like to add that, and I think my colleague, Professor Kirira from Mount Kenya University, talked about it. We may not have the resources to install all the laboratories and equipments that are required in some of our research labs, but through simulations and other access to resources which are in other places, we're able to get easier access and make access to research equipment and research resources more affordable and more accessible for our institutions. Otherwise, there's no point in every institution investing in the same equipment. Why don't we invest in centers of excellence and then link those centers of excellence to the other institutions through the use of technology? That way we are more efficient in terms of resources.
Thank you. Prof. Kiera, please.
Okay, thank you. It's quite an important question because we are able to collaborate and do research with many partners across the globe without having to incur the cost of traveling. Of course, I was discussing with my colleague in the morning, and we were saying that even as we embrace these online platforms, it's also good to have such a meeting. Otherwise, we would have had this meeting online. I would not have been able to connect with the colleagues I'm connecting with. But obviously, we have to have a balance. So we have been able to even have lecturers, come and train our students, do different classes, different times, different time zones, not necessarily having to come and fly in. And that really has helped us to enrich the quality of our training that we're giving the student. We have been able, of course, to hold international conferences where people are able to disseminate their research output, international workshops online, this training on research methods and things like that, high-level meetings. So these are only possible because people have embraced these online platforms and they're able to add value to what we are doing. I liked what Prof mentioned about research and teaching resources, databases, because you can share these databases. We develop them together. You share databases on innovation, databases on pedagogy of teaching, They are there. We have done a couple of projects where now we have databases that institutions can access, and our staff members can be able to access just by making sure that these tools are available anytime. So it is, to me, it is a game changer. The fact that we are able to do this and the fact that we are able to embrace online platforms means that we can have access to a world we never imagined we could have access to. Like Prof has mentioned, you are able to access high computing mainframe computers from across the world when you're seated in Nairobi, just because we have this connection. You're able also to use simulation, virtual realities. All these are possible because we have been able to embrace some of these solutions. So it is, to me, it is good. We need to collaborate more. There's more benefit in doing that because you can share resources that initially were not optimally being used. And therefore, it is a world that is interesting because it is giving a lot of abilities to our learners and also our staff. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think this brings me to my, well, I'm juggling up a little bit on my order of questions here, but the flow seems to be coming from your responses. I guess, and this isn't just an African area of concern, this is a global concern, but I'd love to get your context here and your feedback. AI, 2 years ago, what was AI? Here we are now, and I think the world, and certainly in the commercial world where I sit, are trying to play catch up. We're trying to follow what's happening and move and be as agile as we can. The world is moving at pace, and trying to keep up with that pace is sometimes a bit worrying. And I guess then the question around cybersecurity, data privacy issues that are a global challenge, how do you see, or how are your institutions, or how are you as a region, implementing strategies to actually ensure that you've got the right securities in place to ensure that that data isn't getting out? And particularly if we're talking about important things like research and those collaborations that you're doing, it'd be interesting to get some feedback there. I mean, that's open to all. I won't dictate, but perhaps one of you wants to put your hand up and answer that one first. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. One of the things we are recommending to institutions is that every institution should have in place a cybersecurity policy. And I believe that by the time they develop a cybersecurity policy, it's been found easy for them to stand up to the challenges of cybersecurity. For most institutions, it's always necessary to have a dedicated security team that can be called upon at any time should the challenge comes up. And I believe that beyond that, to stand against cybersecurity challenges, institutions should put in place technical safeguards even before the challenge comes up. And through this, many institutions have been able to solve the problem. And lastly, which I would say is that necessary training and necessary sourcing of software that can help to counter cybersecurity will be very important in all campuses.
Thank you very much. Perhaps Dr. Kira?
Yes, I'll pick from where he has stopped. One, the weakest link when it comes to cybersecurity is the user. So we need to make sure we build capacity of the users, whether it is the students, whether it is our staff, so that they are alive and aware of the dangers that are there when you are using internet. Number two, we also promote the principle of security by design. From the formative levels of system implementation, you must have knowledge of the security requirements. That's the only way, because it's so difficult when you try now to bring on board cyber security measures when already the infrastructure that you have developed is weak. So the principle of security by design to us as an institution is very critical. Number three, the issue of policies. We make sure that we have the right policies and regulations. In Kenya as a country, we have the Act, Cyber Security Act, Data Protection Act, and these are critical. At the institution level, we are required to comply. Anytime we have a breach, we have to notify the Data Protection Commissioner. So to me, these are safeguards that are driven through policies and regulatory framework that will help even the institution be able to manage some of these dangers, because they are there. The dark web is there, and we have people who are trying to penetrate our system all the time. And then, of course, what Professor has mentioned about now having the technical abilities to all the firewalls and all those people who make sure that nobody gets through. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Professor Manji?
I mean, I'm going to defer to my colleagues' far greater experience in this field, but just to add that I think that point about the wider regulatory environment is so crucial. So we mustn't fall into the trap of asking the institutions to bear the burden individually or even collectively, but really to make sure that there is a wider regulatory environment that keeps us safe in relation to cybersecurity.
Thank you. And Professor Gatou?
I think a lot has been said, so I'll just say that even with cybersecurity systems, the responsibility still lies with us in terms of making sure that the systems are working well, the people are behaving correctly, and there's no abuse. I'll just give a quick example. First, we have our graduation next week, but a few years ago, we were looking at our graduation list, and then one of the deans said, I don't believe those students should be in that classification. And we discovered that some students had tried to infiltrate our system. So if we didn't check, then would have graduated students perhaps with the wrong classification. Of course, we suspended or expelled some of them, rehabilitated one. But so we still must check and confirm that everything is, but there's already very good progress towards putting in place cybersecurity measures in our institutions and also training young people on ethical use of systems. We have a program we are running with Mozilla Foundation on responsible computing, and this is really helping to build in our students the capacity to use technology and do innovations in a responsible manner. So again, partnerships come into place.
Thank you. Just going to add to that question, and unfortunately this is one that I hadn't prepared, but it's just come to mind. And you mentioned the word ethics. I think it's really important, and I'm sure this is in a lot of minds at the moment in the higher education space. Do you as institutions or as an organization, or are you aware that you have an ethics policy around the use of generative AI, for instance, both on a research perspective but from a student perspective? Because that's quite a long piece of string to try and manage, and I'm just interested to see or hear any of your thoughts or policies that you may have already generated and created.
Yeah, so we have a number of policies, but I think it goes beyond a policy. It has to be a culture, it has to be a practice within the institution. And so I'll give an example of a partnership we are part of, and I think this is something we could learn from in terms of implementing certain initiatives within the continent. So we have a partnership called the Education Collaborative, and a number of my colleagues here, the institutions, are members of the Education Collaborative. And what we do is we come together as African institutions, and our goal is to train 1.1 million ethical entrepreneurial graduates by the year 2030. And so we have very, very specific strategies that are being implemented across all the institutions. We meet once every year, and then in the regions we meet every quarter, just to see how are we moving together as a collective towards training ethics and ensuring that ethics are also molded, because ethics are not taught, they are caught through role modeling. And so how do we lead? And so that's one example. Another example is, and slightly off, but just give an example. We have a network, called Kenya Network of Entrepreneurial Institution Leaders. And this came out of desire to transition our institutions to become more entrepreneurial. And we discovered we are not really aware of how to go about this. And so we formed that network. We started by training the vice chancellors, and we were 14 vice chancellors, went through training and benchmarking visits everywhere, and we worked together, carried projects into our institutions, and this has worked extremely well. And now we are cascading it down to deputy vice chancellors, faculty members, etc. So it has to be institution-wide, going beyond the policy, but really intentional interventions to change the habits and behaviors of people. Then it becomes authentic in the institution. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps from the association's perspective, have you got any comment you'd like to add there, Prof. Oyewole? On the ethics issue? Nope. Okay.
I think that the ethics of AI is incorporated into the policy developed by the universities. And just as mentioned by the earlier speakers, there are spaces that individual students can navigate, which the personnel in the place can navigate. The ethics give specific descriptions on how to handle data and data sharing. Quite often, there are regulations that control the use of data and the sharing of data in every institution.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Manji, you have anything you'd like to add? No? Okay, good. Finally, Professor Kira.
Okay, yes. Concerning ethics, as an institution right now, we are developing an AI strategy. We have been embracing AI, but we realize that we don't have really a strategy as an institution. But as far as the ethics is concerned, we had captured that at the data protection policy, and also in other policies like the online exam policy, I talked about ethics. But we of course would want to anchor that on our strategy, on the AI strategy, because I think also that will really inform a lot, because our AI strategy is now looking at where the institution would want to go, where we would want to make sure that we leverage on AI. So it's a broad discussion involving stakeholders, and obviously one of the strong components that we'll bring on board is how the ethics of the use of artificial intelligence. But it's a discussion that is important, because I know, of course, even from this forum, maybe I'll get some pointers on how to go about that. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. And then I'll put my final question, which we're going to change it up a little bit here. I'm just interested in really like a sort of case study, really, or what are some successful examples of technology integration at African universities? And from that, what lessons can be learned from those experiences? Perhaps I could start with you, Professor Gatto, and then we could work along the panel.
I think we've sort of covered them. Sorry, we've sort of covered them in the discussions, but I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think all the universities now have learning management systems, one way or another, at least speaking from a Kenyan perspective. ERPs are also across all the institutions. Proctoring software are also appearing quite a bit, as Prof said also. And now, adding on to those, so many other systems, like I mentioned, our own AI system and others. Then using technology to do collaborative online learning with other institutions abroad, hosting competitions and hackathons with institutions abroad, using technology, so virtual hackathons and other things like those. So there's already quite a lot happening, but we still need to address the issues of access to make sure that the technologies are accessible to all the people, they are affordable, and that they are customized to the needs of the various students where they are targeted to operate. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof. Kiera, would you like to add to that?
Yes. Yes, we have some successful examples. I talked about Kennet, which has really allowed our universities to access affordable internet. I think that, to me, is one of the successful examples of technology integration in African universities. But probably it would be nice for me to talk about our experience at Mount Kenya University. And I talked about how we have built our Odell platform, that is online distance and electronic learning. One of the things we have done when it comes to common units, I know most universities have common units, and because they are common units, the number of students is large. So my university, we have about 63,000 students. So our new intake, we have about 10,000, give or take, students. And you can imagine those students need to do a common course. So in terms of infrastructure, what class size would you be able to accommodate 3,000 to 5,000 students? Not possible. So what we realize is that we can offer the common units through SCOM, a SCOM platform. So it's a self-paced platform where the content is put in online. Students are able to log in. They learn at their own pace. You know, right. You finish a unit, a section, a module, and then there's a quiz to make sure that you understood. And then of the course, you do an online examination. That has really reduced the pressure that was there on our physical infrastructure. We have also gone ahead a bit and tried to make sure that we are also considerate of our visually impaired students by having the audio, the audio part of it, so they can hear through the course, and they're able also to do the quizzes and the exam. So to us, the Odell platform has been a game changer for the university. Initially, we had out of 63,000 students, about 10% were in that platform. Right now, we are talking about that 3% of our students are in the Odell platform, which means they don't need to use any physical infrastructure. The focus is to push that to about 40%, 50%. And we have been able to penetrate many parts of the countries that where you have marginalized students who telling them to come to the campuses is expensive because they need accommodation, they need transport, and the costs that are offered through Odell platform are a bit subsidized, meaning they are a bit affordable for them. Yep. The fact that it's online, it means even international students don't have to come to Kenya. We have students from about 43 countries who are studying through the Odell platform. So to us, that's a success story because it has helped us to offer our programs to a wide range of students across the world. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I guess from a final word, perhaps, Prof. Oyewole, is there anything you'd like to add?
One area that I just want to add to what Aleben mentioned is in the area of career and entrepreneurship in our various institutions. We now have institutions that are mounting boot camps within their campuses, startups within their campuses, and through this, we've been able to use these digital tools to enhance graduate employability. And I think that this is one important contribution, innovation in our institutional development. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Well, I think that's probably all the time we have. So I'd like to make a very personal thank you to our panelists today. I think you've done a great job. I guess the takeaway, or one of the larger takeaways from this, is really around that accessibility and creating the ability to make a wider communities having access to these technologies. And I think the piece that was touched on, forgive me, I forgot who, but on the harnessing solar power to create that is a real opportunity there. So I thank you all for your candidness and your ability to talk through these technological questions. So, and thanks to our audience, and please give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you. Thank you. We should do a photo. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers. It's been quite a learning journey. We will now have a very short coffee break in the exhibition hall and return at 11. I repeat, we'll return at the hall at 11. Please do take this opportunity to network and connect with partners and delegates. Thank you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen.
Fantastic.
What are the critical strategies for funding and policy that will drive Africa's knowledge-based future? Let us find out in this panel session. Please welcome moderator Lee Camelins, Director of Analytics and Evaluation at QS.
Good morning, everyone. Just invite the panelists up to the floor. Okay, so thank you very much for joining this session. We actually have quite a treat for you today. You know, I feel like we have some of the most innovative voices in African higher education and actually in higher education around the world here on the stage today. The topic we're going to be talking about is around sustainable funding and policy frameworks for Africa's knowledge economy. So ensuring that research and innovation thrive across the continent, sustainable funding mechanisms and policy frameworks need to be in place. So this panel is going to discuss how public-private partnerships, government support, international funding initiatives, and partnerships between institutions can really drive long-term research, drive knowledge-based economies and knowledge-based economic growth. We're going to focus the discussion around how we create an enabling environment for a more sustainable research environment. I think some of the things that we have been talking about over the recent days have pointed to many of the challenges. And here we're going to really start thinking about like some of the solutions, you know, really practically what we can do to perhaps reinvent some of the models for a more sustainable future. So I will actually just ask each of the panelists to very briefly, you know, in 30 seconds, just introduce themselves.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kayode Ijadunwola, Professor of Public Health Medicine and Assistant Vice Chancellor of Elizade University in Southwest Nigeria. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Muhammad Ahmad. I'm the President of Jamhuriya University of Science and Technology in Mogadishu, Somalia. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ajanoku Kolawole, a professor of industrial chemistry. I'm the Vice Chancellor, Landmark University, which is a sister university to Covenant University, owned by the same proprietor base. Thank you for having me.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good morning. My name is Dr. Halima Abdullahi, Vice Chancellor, Umma University. It's a private university in Kenya, a faith-based private university.
Assalamu alaikum. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Musa Juma Asad. I am an academic of 28, 30 years. My field is accounting and finance.
Thank you very much. So as you can see, we really have a diverse range of voices here, coming from really different contexts they're operating their institutions in. So the first question I'm going to ask to our panelists, and I'll ask each of you this question, is what role do you see partnerships playing in driving research and knowledge growth across the continent?
The role of partnerships in driving knowledge growth across the continent cannot be overemphasized. But the sad story around it is that it's a lot easier to have a North-South collaboration in terms of partnership today than to have a South-South collaboration among even African universities. It might interest you to know that some delegates that are supposed to be at this meeting could not get here because they couldn't even get a visa from a sister African country to come to Tanzania. So how do you forge partnerships in a South-South collaborative manner, even if you can't freely visit your own countries? And I'm talking about professors who have on their passports visas to get to the United States as we speak, to get to Canada as we speak, to get to the United Kingdom as we speak, but who then apply to come to Tanzania, and they were denied visas to come to Tanzania from a sister African country. So that will not promote the kind of partnerships and the growth that we expect and the collaboration that we expect from each other. But that's precisely the direction to go. It's not just about North-South collaboration, which we have a lot of it. We also need a lot of South-South, intra-African collaborations to forge ahead and to peer review each other and to lift each other up, because we have different areas of strengths and weaknesses, and it's in such collaborations that we can level up.
Okay, this is a really interesting observation, though, because I think often when we think of the policy frameworks to support research, collaboration, innovation, we are thinking very much about like higher education policy. And actually, what you're saying here is actually some of the blockers are not even in the higher education policy space. It is the more general, sort of government policies potentially that aren't providing other enablers around this. But this is a point, like maybe we'll come back to a little later, but I think it's a very interesting start to the conversation. If I could, Engineer, could you please tell us your perspective on what role you see partnerships playing in driving research and knowledge growth across the continent?
Well, before discussing the role, since we are talking about funding, I would like to point out a few statistics on where Africa is standing now in terms of funding. And my colleagues have talked about it yesterday. The research output of the continent is roughly 2 to 4%. And the gross expenditure on research and development is 0.4% for the continent, compared to the global average of 1.7%. Most of the African countries remain below the 1% benchmark set by the African Union, except few countries like Egypt and South Africa who have met that benchmark. And that gives us a good picture of how the funding is for research and development in Africa. And to solve that problem, I think we need to have a very strong partnership mechanism and framework for research and development. The role it can play, whether in the form of industry and academia partnership, or it is in the form of government and private sector partnership, or in the form of regional partnership, the role partnership plays is very critical in terms of research. It can play a role in the funding itself, which is a big problem for Africa. It plays a role in capacity building, and it also plays a role in the knowledge transfer and commercialization of research output. There are currently a number of successful partnership case studies in Africa, like the Deltas Africa project, which is developing excellence in leadership, training, and science in Africa. It had a phase one, Deltas 1, from 2015 to 2022, with 100 million funding and 11 consortium, 54 institutions in 24 countries. With the current phase of Deltas 2, from 2023 to 2026, it has 70 million. So you can see from Deltas 1, it was 100 million, now it is 70 million, which means the fund has become less and less. And it is funded by, mainly by external funding institutions like Wellcome Trust and UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. The impact is good. It has trained around 2,000 researchers, 50% of them are women, and has produced around 1,500 peer-reviewed articles. The second case study is the African Centers of Excellence, or the ACE project. It is funded by the World Bank, mainly, with more than $600 million. But we can see from all the case studies that we have, the partnership case studies that we have in Africa are mainly dependent on external funding. And we know how things are going when it comes to external funding. Recently, we have had the case of USAID and the and the decision of Trump administration to stop funding or even to stop the USAID and shift its work to the State Department. So I think we need to have in Africa more of local partnerships that are mainly funded by local actors instead of heavily relying on external funders. Thank you very much.
I think that's a really interesting point. You know, there is this over-reliance, I think, historically on these external funding mechanisms, which, doesn't give you the sort of, sustainable approach, doesn't give you, agency over what's happening here. So let's come back to this question a little bit later, because I think it's a really important point. So, Professor, can you please tell us your perspective on what role you see partnerships playing in driving research and knowledge growth across the continent?
Thank you very much. Like it has been said by my other partners, funding is one of the major issues in driving a partnership. And when it comes to funding, where you stopped is where I will start from. When it comes to funding, instead of looking externally, why can't we also start to develop internally within Africa? Not only within Africa alone, we can also look at our local settlement, our government. That's also another area in which we can also begin from. For instance, the chancellor of our university just 2 months ago gave us $1 million for research that is product-based. It is called Community Relevant Industry and Product-Based Research Fund. You can access it once you have a policy. The policy is there. Once you meet up with the criteria. About last week, we just finished about the policy, and it has been circulated as at the time I was leaving the country for this meeting. It is accessible to all funds, both the academia and also the non-teaching that are technologists. The essence of this is, instead of looking out, let's look inward. Let's raise funds. That's one area. We can have chairs within the university, and the chancellor has done that. And you see, that's one. Two, we also have industries that are doing research-based products that they also need to give back to the system. And these are also areas in which we can look inward within our local content to be able to situate funding. It is a major need in driving the academic excellence and also in driving the knowledge economy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, thank you. We'll come back and explore some of these issues in a little bit as well. I think there's this very interesting dynamic between, how we partner and engage industry effectively, how we overcome some of the dynamics in working with government to sort of enable this and so forth, that I think could be interesting to drill into here. So, Dr. Halima, can you please tell us your perspective on what role you're seeing partnerships playing in the research and knowledge growth across the continent?
Thank you so much. So I'll pick it up from the last panelist, and he brought, he spoke about the issue of us looking internally, and more importantly, looking at the resources we have, whether the resources is within Africa or the resources are externally, but it's still our people who are externally, and why we should maybe stop depending so much on South-North. And I'll bring an element of what we call diaspora funding. And I think as universities, this is something we are doing it, but I don't think we've given it the attention that it requires and what it can do for us. So as we look internally and we try to see the resources we need, and in respect to knowledge-based economy in Africa, I think I'll give a few examples of some of the ongoing diaspora funding or diaspora approach or diaspora partnership that is really contributing either to research or education, skill development that are very critical or very key pillars, or ICT that are very key pillars in terms of a knowledge-based economy. The previous panel that was discussing on digital transformation, my colleague from Mount Kenya University spoke about an organization, a public organization in Kenya called KENET, which is providing affordable, accessible digital infrastructure to public institutions and private institutions, especially of higher education, the universities. And this particular institution has really worked with partners, including people in diaspora, to be able to access this kind of facility. Another good example is we have a partnership called Open Air Partnership, and this partnership is between a number of partners, including University of Cape Town and Strathmore University in Kenya, and they are working with diaspora researchers in 3 areas: in the area of law, economics, and innovation studies. And this particular partnership, the experts that are in the diaspora are building the capacity of young men and women in Africa in this kind of areas of expertise. And this covers about 15 African countries. So with this kind of example, I think we do have resources, and funding does not have to be money alone. Funding can be expertise, can be other resources. We also have another partnership, African Institute for Mathematics Science, that is working with diaspora scholars in South Africa, Ghana, Rwanda, Cameroon, Senegal, and they're advancing training in STEM fields for young men and young women who are in Africa. So I think it's high time also as institutions of higher learning and partners supporting institutions of higher learning that we look at our brothers and sisters who are in diaspora. And I think in most African countries, if I speak for Kenya, there's a lot of, even the government now has set an office called Diaspora Desk. And part of our funding, part of our budgets, the national budget, diaspora contribution is taken into consideration as part of the budget because there's a lot of money coming from the diaspora. So in addition to money, can we also access expertise? Yes.
Can I ask a question about
Yes.
this? I think this is a very interesting model to think about, how can harness the power of diaspora communities to address some of this issue, not fully, obviously. Do you think this would be something completely unique, like globally, if this was to happen? Do you think things like this are happening in other parts of the world already?
Yeah, it is happening. I will speak about my neighboring country, which also is my mother country, Somalia, and I think we have scholars from the country. And I think most fragile state countries, the people who are building those countries now are people from the resources from their diaspora. And if you look at institutions of higher learning established, currently running in those countries, there are private universities that have been started by people from the diaspora. And yesterday, I was speaking to one of my colleagues from Somalia, and I was telling him, there's this big project where Somalia is endeavoring to invest in renewable energy. And a lot of private investors from their diaspora wants to really invest in renewable energy. But the biggest challenge is lack of skills. In the country, there is not enough skilled people to actually run this project. Although the resources are there, the sun is there, the wind is there, but the skill is not there. So now, even if the investors come to invest in renewable energy, they first must invest in education and skills development before they're able to harness the investment.
Okay, thank you. And Professor Musa, could you please tell us your perspective, on what role you see partnerships playing in driving research and knowledge growth across Africa?
Thank you. I can't hear you very well, but I think I got the gist of the question. Thank you very much. I think in terms of partnership and collaboration, knowledge transfer has 4 components. You're talking about university who have knowledge. You're talking about the industry which should apply the knowledge, and that is what you call innovation. And then you talk of investors who should fund innovation. And the final bit is the government. The government should be funding research. There's a small difference between research and innovation. Innovation is application in industry. Research may not have application straight away. So in terms of partnership and collaboration, you see the role of collaboration between universities and industries. And what is critical here is for the industry to open up and provide opportunities for universities to be able to resolve some of their issues. And for universities to have specific officials to be able to address problems in industries. And I think the good news is in Africa, a lot of universities have formed these offices. I think they call them innovation offices, and they do that job very well. So that is basic collaboration. But in terms of partnership, you look for partnership in terms of venture capitalists coming in and funding innovation so that university can also solve industrial problems, and they will also benefit because they provide the capital. If there's any spin-off, then universities and venture capitalists, both of them make money. So that is a good way to partner. But in terms of the government, the government doesn't get anything back except for growth in economy which is also positive for the government, but the government has a role to finance research in private universities, but also in public universities. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Okay, Professor Coyote looks very eager to respond to that.
Yeah,
Please.
thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much. I think there's a demonstrable best practice in terms of partnerships in African universities that we must discuss here. Otherwise, we will not be doing enough justice to that concept. I don't know how many of us have heard about the Consortium for Advanced Research Training in Africa, CATA, the CATA initiative. The CATA initiative was started about 10 years ago by a consortium of about 10 universities in Africa and some 7 northern partners with the sole aim of increasing the number of PhDs in Africa over 20 years because of the shortage in number of university-based teachers. And the leaders were from South Africa and Kenya, the people who put the proposal together to get the funding for CATA. And emphasis is on female academics in our universities who are pursuing PhDs. Of course, men are also brought in top, but emphasis is on females. And they make sure that over 3 years, they give these CATA fellows, they're called, very, very intensive training towards attaining their PhDs in record time in all the 10 partner institutions. I think Kenya, Uganda, South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, 1 or 2 in North Africa, and then some of the partners, from Sweden, from the UK, a lot of funding from Wellcome Trust and many of the other African countries as it were. They rotate, there's something they call the JAS training, Joint Advanced Seminars, where all the fellows, about 20 fellows are appointed every year. And they go around the sister countries, in South Africa for JAS 1, in Kenya for JAS 2, in Nigeria, JAS 3, like that. And they give them funding support so they're not distracted, so they can concentrate, and finish their PhDs in record time. They also train supervisors. They empower supervisors to be able to concentrate on the students. I think that's one model that has really worked to help, African universities to make the progress in terms of our knowledge economy, to train many more PhDs, and to have publications, emanating from all of these trainees, as it were. And it's something that we should be thinking of replicating.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective, actually, because it is, this enablement of people within the institutions already, whether that's the academia, whether that's the students, the support they have, to enable, creating that environment for them to succeed is absolutely vital. Yeah, I know many people who have spent, 8 years, 10 years trying to finish their PhD, and actually this is actually a practical way I think we can unlock this knowledge that already exists a lot quicker. So thank you for that contribution. I'm going to jump back down to the other end of the panel. I want to ask Dr. Halima one more question about what she was talking about. So you were talking about these diaspora communities, and the way you were describing this just made me think, this sounds quite similar to the type of activities American universities do in how they engage their alumni. A lot of their funding does not come from these external sources. It comes from their alumni who they have nurtured these relationships with. Do you think there is an opportunity for universities within Africa to foster their even more immediate communities to solve some of these challenges?
Yes, it's the same model, because for the advanced universities who depend on the alumni, it's still their resources, the people they have trained, the people who they have impact skilled, who have come back to assist the university. The concept or the approach is more or less the same, because in Africa, if you look at most African countries, we invest in our young men and women, and for example, there's a foundation called More Foundation. The More Foundation pays school fees for students from Africa to go and study in the UK. And when they go to study in the UK, we can call them the alumni of More Foundation, for lack of a better word. So the expectation is even if most of them don't come back, because also you have the brain drain aspect of life, at least they can support from wherever they are as a resource, whether financially or their expertise. So it's more or less the same model, but so it's what we call build your own, because the alumni are building their own university. So we are hoping also the young men and the young women from Africa, wherever they are, whether they're in Africa or outside, they can also still contribute to the economy.
Okay, thank you very much. And our other panelists here, I want to ask you a question about the role of industry in this. So both of you, Engineer Professor, were talking a lot about how industry and institutions could collaborate better and how we create the right framework to do that. Could you elaborate a little bit on, some specific examples where you have seen this being successful? And Engineer, if I start with you, please.
I think we can learn from already working models in other parts of the world. And my focus is the sustainable funding. For example, as a case study, we have a model called Embrapa model in Brazil. It is the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation, and it's a partnership between the public sector research institution with local farmers, universities, and private agribusiness. That model, or that partnership model, has helped Brazil to be a global food exporter through locally relevant and publicly funded approach. The funding model comes from three parties. The first is from the public fund. 1/3 of the funding comes from the public fund, and 1/3 comes from the private companies in cash contribution, and 1/3 comes from the research institutions as an in-kind contribution or as a financial contribution. That model doesn't rely on external funding for the purpose of the research and output, and it has created, for example, in the last year from 2023 to 2024, it has supported projects, more than 2,000 projects in Brazil, and 17 institutions from different parts of the world were involved. And from that model, we can learn that it is a demand-driven innovation. It is co-funding and risk-sharing, because all the partnerships are co-funding and contributing to the research initiative. And it's also performance-based contract, which means that funds are tied to the output and the result of maybe the previous one or the previous phase. So I think Africa can learn from the models in the world and can adapt them and localize them to the context of the continent, for example.
Okay, I really like these approaches. I think that gives you back that control of what's going on. You can drive the agenda, really, reshape and rethink those types of partnerships. Do you, Professor, do you have any other examples you might like to share about how industry and institutional partnerships have worked? Industry and university partnerships.
Thank you very much. Definitely for industry collaboration, there will be funding. I remember when I was doing my postdoc in one of the Asian countries. The project was based on waste management. And then we developed a proposal. And somebody was asking me yesterday, how many months did you spend? In that place, I spent 9 months instead of a year. Why? Because I have to prepare also 2 additional proposals. Why? There was funding, and I was able to execute all those assignments within that period of time, and trying to look at so many areas. Once it's executed, published. And you see, when it's also published, that's another topic for another day. It's also an issue for you to have it patent. Once it's published, you cannot be able to patent that. So I also took that same knowledge, that same approach to my university. And my PhD students, they go out to the industry to check for solutions to their problems. And that now form the basis of their research. Because what I did in that Asian country has to do with solving the industry problem. And they were funding it. And within 3 months, we finished the first phase. My host said, no, let's put up another proposal. You cannot just go home like that. And then another company funded that. So what I always do for my postgraduate students is also push them to the industry. Go and look at the problem in this industry. Come up with your proposal. And this not only executed within the university system, but we get the industry also involved. Mm-hmm. So in Landmark University, in Covenant University, we always have industry-related experts in the panel of examiners for those students. So after the examination, they take the solutions back to the industry. So that's where one of the funding is also coming from.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wish we had a lot more time to continue this discussion, because I feel like we're only scratching the surface on this issue, but we are going to have to move on. So I'm going to ask each of you in less than 30 seconds, just tell me, what is the one thing you think we can practically do now to change the nature of these relationships? And I know you have talked to some of these already.
One thing we can do now to change this narrative.
The one thing that will have the biggest impact, perhaps.
To be very factual, many of our universities tout to be research-intensive universities in Africa, but we're not. Most universities are not research-intensive. You have a few research champions in the universities. A majority of the academia are doing research for promotion, not for research for impact.
Okay, we're running out of time, so I'm going to summarize your point I think you're trying to make, which is we need to rethink our research orientation. Is that
so
correct?
We need to have functional offices of research in the various universities that support the staff to be able to produce competitive grant proposals to attract funding to the university. The point I was trying to make with my premise was that many people are not attracting grants to the university. They're only doing research for promotion rather than research for impact that will bring money to the university.
Okay, so really thinking how we support that research environment, make that central to what the university is doing.
Exactly.
Okay, what is the one thing that you think will make the biggest impact here?
I think the most important thing is the leadership commitment, the will and the intention. The amount of money is not as important as the intention and the will. The leadership at the government and state level and the leadership at the higher education level need to be very committed into this agenda, and it has to be aligned to the national agenda of that specific country and the priorities of that country.
Okay, the leadership commitment.
I think the leadership commitment is the first.
Perfect. One thing that's going to make the biggest difference.
Okay, thank you. In 1 minute, I think institutions also should have the focus of either you are doing a community-based project that will be able to showcase you externally, or you are solving industry problem. And you see the funding, to sustain such funding, you can either break down to either a short-term goal, for instance, having 1 year project in which that will lead to a product to solve, or you have a long term. The long term can also be capped, depending on revolving of such research.
Okay, so more of a community orientation to what we're doing, is that, yeah. Okay, what is the one thing that will make the biggest impact?
I think one thing that we need to maybe actively change is our dependence on government funds and the continuous narrative that government is not giving us funds to be able to undertake either research or training or innovations. And we need to start having a mentality of abundance mentality and look internally, the expertise we have amongst ourselves, whether within the region or outside the region, and be able to diversify the areas we look for funds or we look for support. So I think that dependency on government, I'm sure most VCs will agree with me here. The funding every other year keeps reducing, and I think we need to get away from that.
Okay, thank you. And the final word, what do you think is going to have the most impact?
Thank you very much. I think, in my view, the most important aspect is staffing. So if there's something I will change, I'll change staff attitude so that research is not just for publishing. Research should be for problem resolution. If we do that, funding will come and collaboration will come. But secondly, institution must reward innovation, not just publishing. It has to be renovation as well.
We must reward innovation. Okay, so we have we need to create that. Just to summarize everyone's perspective here, we need to create that internal enablement of research. We need to really think about that partnership and how we enable the partnership with industry. We need to think about how we stop relying on these external things out of our control. We can engage different types of communities, make sure our research matters to the communities around us and so forth. And then, we really, do need that leadership perspective over that to make all of this a success. And I think with leaders such as these that we've had on the stage, I think we're, setting ourselves on course for the right future in this space. So thank you all very much for your perspectives. I'm sorry we didn't have more time to discuss further, but I think there's going to be many discussions continue a little later over lunch. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to the panel for the discussion. Today, QS Quacquarelli Siemens and the Association of African Universities are entering into a new chapter of collaboration, working together to strengthen international visibility, enhance research capacity, and support the launch of QS Sub-Saharan African rankings. May I now invite Mr. Jason Newman, Chief Commercial Officer, QS, and Professor Olusola Oyewole, Secretary General of the Association of African Universities, to kindly join us on stage for the official exchange of Memorandum of Understanding. I also want to invite Veronica Omeni, Chair of the conference, and Dr. Ashwin Fernandez, Executive Director, to join on the stage for the photo opportunity. Please join me in applauding this partnership dedicated to the future of African higher education. We have now reached the end of the day 2. To deliver the closing remarks, please welcome Dr. Ashwin Fernandez, Executive Director for Africa, Middle East and South Asia at QS.
A very good afternoon. As we gather here for the closing of what has been a truly remarkable forum, let us pause for a moment to reflect on what we have all shared together for the last 2 days. We came across from different continents and beyond, carrying diverse languages and histories, and yet here in Zanzibar, a place shared by centuries of exchange, we found common ground for our shared commitment. And that commitment is to elevate African higher education and unlock its full potential. As we have seen from the insights, by 2050, nearly a quarter of the world's working age population will live in Africa. And this is not a forecast, it is a call to action. While other regions are aging, Africa is rising, powered by its youth, creativity, and definitely the urgency for action. But potential alone is not enough. We must prepare, and education should be relevant, inclusive, and forward-thinking. And Africa is not starting from scratch. This continent has long been a cradle of innovation. It is home to some of the fastest growing economies, to vibrant cultural industries, and to a digital revolution which is led by young entrepreneurs and change makers. Across sectors, from agriculture to aerospace, African talent is rewriting global narratives and proving that the future is already being built here. Throughout the summit, we have been reminded that traditional education systems must evolve. Universities are not just places of learning, they are engines of innovation, transformation, and equity. To remain relevant, institutions must align their curriculum with the demands of the modern workforce, integrating digital literacy, STEM, soft skills, entrepreneurship, and vocational pathways into every discipline. We've seen powerful examples of collaboration. The IIT Madras campus here, along with the partnership with MCBS from Oman, demonstrates what's possible when institutions transcend borders. And Zanzibar is now positioned not just as a hub of heritage and tourism, but as a beacon for global education, connecting Africa to Asia, the Middle East, and beyond. And yet, we've also heard the hard truths. Too many graduates remain unemployed. Too many research findings remain unpublished or uncommercialized. Too often, academia and industry speak past each other instead of with each other. This gap must close. We must create shared language, shared goals, and shared success through collaboration. Technology transfer must no longer be an aspiration. It must become a standard. Universities need to go beyond ensuring that knowledge leads to jobs, solutions, and to change. We've heard of successful models like research parks, incubators, and startup ecosystems, all showing that when education and enterprise intersect, everyone benefits. To enable meaningful progress and ensure accountability, we've launched the QS Sub-Saharan Africa Rankings, a dedicated tool to track institutional progress, promote regional mobility, and catalyze transformation across the higher education landscape. This initiative is not just about benchmarking. It's about creating shared standards, celebrating African excellence, and driving continuous improvement. As the African Union sets its sight on increasing the continent's share of global research to to 10% and producing 100,000 PhDs by 2034, higher education must remain the bedrock of sustainable development. It is to robust, research-driven and future-ready institutions that we will realize the ambitions of Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. But this alone cannot fall on the universities. Governments must create enabling policies, industries must invest in skills and not just in infrastructure, communities must shape research agendas and reflect real-world needs, from agriculture to health, from climate to commerce. We were reminded that the education of today must begin long before the university. It starts in our classrooms, in our communities, in how we inspire young minds to think critically, solve problems, and dream boldly. This generation of learners doesn't want jobs, they want purpose. It is our responsibility to give them the tools to build it. The conversations we have had over the last 2 days were rich, challenging, yet deeply necessary. But more than anything, they reminded us that Africa doesn't need to catch up. Africa must leap forward on its own terms, with its own models, and in many ways, it is already doing so. What the world often calls emerging, we know that Africa is striving, determined, and ready. As we prepare to close, let me remind you all, this summit is not the end. It is the beginning of a renewed commitment and courageous collaboration. Our task now is to return home not only with the insights, but with intent, to not just reimagine the future, but to build it. So in conclusion, let us take action to transform curricula to reflect 21st century realities, embed research into communities and economies, champion local innovation and reward impact, and let's believe deeply and collectively in the potential of Africa's youth. As we close, I would like to express my deepest gratitude, first, to His Excellency Dr. Hussein Ali Munye, the President of Zanzibar and the Chairman of the Revolutionary Council, for his leadership and support in bringing this conference and the summit to Zanzibar. To Honorable Leila Mohammed Musa, the Minister of Education and Vocational Training for Zanzibar, for his support in championing this event and for enabling various resources to make it successful. To our keynote speakers, Dr. Phumzile Lambo Guka, the founder and president of the Umlambo Foundation, for her advocacy for inclusive, high-impact learning across Africa. To Professor Olusula Bandele Oyewole, the Secretary General of the Association of African Universities, for his efforts to strengthen Pan-Africa collaboration and the higher education landscape. To His Excellency, Mr. Saeed Salim Hamid Al-Sanawi, the Consul General of the Sultanate of Oman, to Zanzibar, your support in early days and to the build-up were really instrumental in us having the successful summit. And not to forget, the driving force behind this event from MCBS, Dr. Munir Al-Maskari, the founder and executive chairman of the Modern College of Business and Science. When this idea was mooted earlier last year, and he shared his deep commitment to Zanzibar and his support for a charity school, which he and many other people support here in Zanzibar. And if you have the time, you should go and see it in Bioju. We said, why not deepen that further through a collaboration between Oman and Africa? And that's how the summit was born. And definitely to Ms. Aisha Al-Karousi, the Deputy Executive Chairman, for her leadership, bringing everybody together, and for all the sleepless evenings and nights and mornings we have given her and her team Now, I will not name everybody in the team, but they have been amazing, and a round of applause to all of them. To Veronica Omeni, the principal consultant and chair of the forum, who has guided and transformed how we have taken the summit from Morocco to Nigeria to Ghana and right here in Zanzibar. A round of applause to Veronica. To Jason Newman, the Chief Commercial Officer of QS, for his continued dedication to connecting not just the commercial activities of QS, but to all of us to bring us together with the support at the executive leadership. Thank you, Jason, and really we appreciate your support. I can go on thanking everybody, but definitely the final one I have here is the QS team. And not just the ones here, but those who are based across different continents, right from the UK to the Middle East to Asia. Those who are here on site, those who are supporting us remotely, those who are in marketing and various other activities. This has been a worldwide effort from QS to make this a successful event. And also to all the speakers, and we know the challenges for you to travel. Some of you have traveled overnight. I've heard some people have taken almost 24 hours to get here, including the Secretary General, Professor Oyewole, who's had also a missed flight and got here after a lot of effort. So to all our speakers and every participant who has made it here today, we would like to thank you for coming here. And our sponsors. Our sponsors have been instrumental in making this event possible, and a round of applause to all our sponsors. So may the connections you have made here ripple forward, may the spirit of collaboration continue, and may this moment we have started spark and ignite further collaborations, not just for African education, but for African leadership in the world. Africa is not waiting for change. Africa is creating it. Thank you, and see you in 2026 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Safe travels.
Thank you, Dr. Ashwin. Please now welcome Aisha Al-Kharousi, Deputy Executive Chairperson at Modern College of Business and Science, to give her closing remark.
Wow, how can I even possibly match that? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues and friends. Let's try to say this properly. Kila kizuri, kina mwisho wake. All good things must come to an end. But as we've witnessed here, endings are not farewells, they are invitations. Invitations to carry forward the ideas we've shared, the friendships we've formed, and the quiet but powerful hope we hold. That education has the power to transform lives. Over the past 1.5 days, the QS Africa Forum has reminded us that when people come together, open to listening, sharing, and learning, something meaningful always happens. As co-host from the Modern College of Business and Science in Oman, it has been our honor to support this forum alongside so many dedicated educators and individuals in this room who care deeply about their communities and future cornerstone of their country. On behalf of our Executive Chairman, Dr. Munir Al-Miskari, our Board of Governors, and the entire MCBS community, I want to extend our heartfelt thanks to QS for trusting us to be part of this journey. Allow me to share something personal to us. This forum has brought us to full circle. What began as a dream of a young man born here in Zanzibar is today a nationally celebrated reality in Oman. That dreamer, entrepreneur, educator, and philanthropist is our very own Executive Chairman, Dr. Munir al-Miskari. His vision and determination gave birth to the Modern College of Business and Science in Oman in 1996, the first full-fledged private college 2 years after the formation of Ministry of Higher Education. Today, MCBS stands as a place of learning, growing, and opportunity for thousands of students from Oman, Tanzania, and over 60 nationalities. MCBS is proud to have walked this path under 30 years, growing quietly but steadily, and always placing students at the heart of what we do. With over 600 graduates from Tanzania, we have been fortunate to share in the stories of so many young people whose lives are now tied between Oman and East Africa. For us, this isn't just the statistics. It's a source of deep pride and a reminder of the bonds that education can build across borders. Though far from Oman, we have felt completely at home in Zanzibar. We were especially honored by the presence of His Excellency, Dr. Hussein Ali Mwinyi, President of Zanzibar. His support added such meaning to this gathering, and we are sincerely grateful. To the Honorable Leila Mohammed Musa, Minister of Education Zanzibar, and her wonderful team, led by Dr. Mwana Khamisi, Asanteni Sana, for the warm kindness and care you've extended to all of us. We would like to extend a special thank you to the Oman Consul General in Zanzibar, His Excellency Saeed Al-Sinawi, whose behind-the-scenes support was instrumental in making this forum a success. His quiet diplomacy and encouragement to arrange this forum in Zanzibar reminded us that collaboration is most powerful when it's humble and sincere. To Mr. Jason Newman, Mark, thank you for the clarity and insight that you brought to this forum. And to our dear friend, sorry to say friend in this forum, but to our dear friend, Dr. Ashwin Fernandez, your leadership and genuine passion to the cause of education brought us all here today in the best way possible. To everyone who worked behind the scenes from the QS and MCBS team, thank you so much. Thank you. This forum would not have been possible without your collective positive energy and quiet dedication and teamwork. I would also like to express our sincere appreciation to the panelists who generously shared their expertise and reflections across these 1.5 days. Your contributions gave depth and direction to the conversation, and your honesty reminded us why we do what we do as educators. To the vice chancellors and higher education leaders here in this room, thank you for your insights, your vision, and for standing with us to advance the future of education on this continent and beyond. And as we each return to our campuses and countries, I offer a simple and open invitation on behalf of the Modern College of Business and Science. Let's stay connected and keep the dialogue materialized. Whether through student and faculty exchange, collaborative projects, or simply exchanging ideas and best practices, we welcome the opportunity to nurture that friendship and shared purpose that this world deserves, and that brings us here at the QS Africa Forum in the beautiful Paradise Island of Unguja, Zanzibar. So as we close, let me leave you with this thought. The future is not something we inherit. It is something we build together. Once again, on behalf of the Modern College of Business and Science in Oman, Thank you for joining us here. Until we meet again, perhaps next time in our magical, beautiful Sultanate of Oman. Thank you. I would now like to invite Mr. Jason Newman, Chief Commercial Officer at QS, to kindly join us on stage to present a certificate of appreciation to Dr. Munir Al-Maskiri, Executive Chairman of Modern College of Business and Science, in recognition of the continuous support and for being a true ambassador for higher education excellence. As we draw to a close, we want to express our sincere gratitude to each and every one of you. Your active participation and insightful contribution have truly made the QS Africa Forum 2025 a remarkable success. It has been an incredible, enriching, and inspiring 2 days, filled with invaluable learning and impactful connections. Thank you all for making this such an amazing and memorable event. We will see you next year. As we wrap up, we invite you to join us for the lunch reception, which will be served in the exhibition hall until 2 p.m. Following lunch, we will be departing from the hotel at 2 p.m. for a guided walking tour of Stone Town. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.